Peace, peace. I'm Mallah-Divine Mallah. I am the host of Malah's Insight. I'm the author as well of The Hidden Hand, Duality of Self, and Prison Survival, Hell's Prison. Today, I have one of the illustrious members of the Nation of Gods and Earths, and I will let him introduce himself.
Peace. My name is Allah B, and I'm a member of the Five Perecneter Nation of Gods and Earths, which I have been from its inception in 1964. I was taught, yes, truly, by Allah the Father, who actually saved me from parallel running from the police after doing wrong. And since that event, actually, I received the knowledge of myself, and it enabled me, after being empowered with the truth, to live up to most of my potential. And that was as I was taught to be great. Educationally, I did pretty all right. Teaching as well over the years. Had a harsh experience of imprisonment, long-term situation, but that didn't prevent me from teaching civilization to others and improving on my very own self. And that would be about the gifts of my growth and development, aside from growing up in Harlem, having been raised in a nuclear family of having the father and the mother there with 6 siblings, brothers and sisters, that is. And generally knowing street life. And street life was a real challenge for anybody, especially growing up in Harlem with all the things that was in the street.
Most people know that you've been around since the inception of, or almost the inception of, the early years of the Nation of Gods and Earths or the 5% culture. One of the things that I'm curious to know was, how was the first non-born determined?
Well, I really don't know or don't remember the exact way that Allah had told us that they was determined, but they wasn't the very first that got knowledge per se as far as he started teaching, because he started teaching in the mosque, then in the street amongst his peers or contemporaries, and then in the basement where there were other, people that actually came into it. But he had taught many, but I think it was that the ones that he did select as the first non-born was real influential in the area of Central Harlem, the Apollo district, the Apollo Theater district in the 120s in that area by the St. Nicholas Project. And he had observed us, unbeknown to us. I spoke to Ibn Allah, who is widely known as New York Freddie Myers, and he was out of the project. Stephen Foster Project was the name of it at the time, but it later became Dr. Martin Luther King Towers. And he said that he knew the father since he was 10, and the father was observing him in the streets in that project since he was 10. And for me, I almost said the same thing, because me and Ayala, the father's firstborn son, was friends since I was 10. He was 9 years young. And we was hustling behind the Apollo Theater, and the father used to come to get him. I just knew him as Buster's dad. But he was observing us and knew how we was acting in the street. And in that observation, he was seeing who was the influencer, who was the leader, right, of the group. And I took that he observed Messiah and them on 127th Street, where he used to hang out, 127, 126, one block from his house, and he would observe them as well. And Messiah was the firstborn that he designated as the firstborn. But Messiah was not the first that was actually taught by him. But he was designated October 7th as the firstborn. So I just took that to say that Messiah had that quality about him that was magnetic, attracting other youth, and he had the leadership ability in his attraction of the other youth. And some of the other firstborn did too, like Al Jawa. Looked like he loaded up.
Okay, now, let me ask a question.
Yeah.
Like during the first Universal Parliament, right?
Mm-hmm.
When the father he came home, and I had the first Parliament, the Mount. What was it? It was called the Mount.
It was later written as the Servant on the Mount.
Okay, good. So now, but in it, I wasn't there. I wasn't born yet. So let's make that clear. So people don't think I was there. But he said he made a proclamation, and I thought that was interesting. You know, or a proclamation was a tribute to him. He said, "No dope, no white woman, and no pork."
Yes. Now, I don't recall him saying that at that parliament, which I was there.
Okay.
But I do know that he did say that, and he told it to me in this way, that there was 3 forbidden fruits of Islam. And he said that pig, heron, and white women was the 3 forbidden fruits that we was not to mess with and indulge in. And we wasn't eating pig, so we knew the pig was forbidden. We wasn't messing with white women because we knew that that would be counterproductive to us maintaining the seed of our originality. You know, if you have a baby from a black man, have a baby from a white woman, then you're having a half original. That the seed would be half original, half black, half white. But it wouldn't be wholly black and it wouldn't be wholly white. So you wouldn't be maintaining the purity of the original, and you would be grafting it out as Yakub grafted it out. So he knew that. But there was some ambiguity in regards to the heron, because at this time in 67, we had that parliament April 30th, 67, brothers was messing with heron. When up until November of 66, it was negative. No heron. I used to sell heron with the brother that I mentioned, New York Fred, Ibn Allah, and he was a kingpin, you know, and we was talking about making millions off of it at 14 to 15 to 16 years old. We didn't get to the millions at that time, but with the knowledge, we kind of backed up, slacked up, or whatever, left it alone from about 64, 65. But what changed it in 66 is that Messiah, Bishmael, and Uherah went to see the father in Manoah. and he told them that they had to master everything. And he was giving them the instructions to give us the instructions because they was the three divine ministers when we went through the ministry for 3 months from November 25th, December 25th, and January 25th of 67. We had 3 parliaments, house parliaments, and it was due to the ministry. But it just so happened that in November, Messiah came home from the institution jail, the Rock, and they went to see the father, and the father told them that they had to master everything. We was going through the mastery of everything, mastering 120, mastering everything that we did, and, you know, being civilized. But when they was told about that, he told them that, and they asked a question, everything? And he said, yeah, everything. And their interest was, I don't know where it came from, but it seemed as though it was Heron. And they asked, Heron too? And he said, yes, Heron too. And the only way to master that is to leave it alone.
They left that part out.
They left that part out.
I want to follow something up before you said something about the minister book, and I don't really think a lot of people in this day and time of father sinners actually know or even heard or even understood, like, what was the concept of the minister book? What happened to it?
Well, the concept was that the father wanted to qualify 50 administrators. People call it the ministry book, but he told us that we had to administer the truth unto the people. So we was administrators, right? But he wanted 50. And the 50 was in conjunction with the 50 states in the United States. And each one of us who had qualified was to go to a state and teach in that state. Okay, so we went through the qualifications of it, that Messiah, Bismillah, and Yahara were the 3 assigned divine administrators. And they was to take us through the ministry. And that was to sit at the House Parliament in the hot seat. And it was smoking. And they took us through, meticulously at that, through the 120. You know, that you had to master it and manifest it, and then answer the questions that they would come with. And whatever they may have been, you had to show and prove. And it was an intimidating factor that you was with these 3 individuals, and they was fire breathers, you know, and it was like a test when you know, that the anxiety that you have when you take a test, that you may know all of the material, but it's the time in which you're taking this test that you don't want to make a mistake, and you ain't got too much time to answer it. So you really pressured to answer it correctly in the time in which you had to correct it. And in most instances, people make mistakes under those type of pressures.
So indeed.
You know, but they took us through the ministry. 50 of us was qualified, and the father wanted 50. They made a list that of that 50, 16 was actually qualified by them. And I was the last one qualified. Janelle was the 15th. Dr. Janelle, he was the 15th.
So why was it discontinued?
It was sealed, and this is a good question. It was sealed when the father came home because he heard that they was forming things like it was an elite entity in the nation. We was 5 percenters. And it wasn't no big U's, no big I's and small little U's, you know, but they was forming elitism that we had a crib, my crib to be exact. And I got it from the brother Naheem, the one that wrote God in the Ghetto. But I had a crib, and that's where we had the parliaments at. And the reason why we had it there is that when Messiah came home from the institution, he was staying with his old earth. But I gave him a job. I was the youth director at RUI and was able to give him a job. As I gave a couple other guards that came home jobs. We was only making, I think, 37.60 a week, stuff like that. That was the first anti-poverty program in America, and we used to run it. But anyway, Messiah was staying with his old earth, and everybody was piling up in Miss Johnson's house. Okay, and I was putting a lot of weight on her. We was eating food, staying in her house, hanging out and all that. But I had a crib, and it was big and accommodating. So I told Messiah, yo, you can stay here. And I wanted Messiah to stay with me anyway. That was my man. And he stayed at my crib. And now that brought the whole crowd to that crib. And when the father said that we was the whole of parliaments, they got that information, I think, around November the 12th. And started holding the first parliament November the 25th. And they formed like the elite of the nation. And it was just like it was us and everybody that wasn't in the crib or wasn't a minister was just of the good equality. That was the qualification too. That when you went through the ministry, you became a minister, or either you was put in the book of the good equality, or you was put in the book of the bad equality. So it was 3 sets that was being developed. And I guess when the father came home and learned of that, it wasn't appreciated and he didn't like it. So he sealed it and he said there wasn't going to be no more ministry because it wasn't applied right.
Gotcha. So Allah also, at one point, he had appointed different guards to different tasks, including yourself to go out to Pelon. Like, what was his, like, how did he choose people for what tasks to do what? Like, what was?
That's a real good question, and that's one that never really been put out there in answering. I don't remember what month it was, but I remember how it came about, I think in the fall of 67. And Rajab was assigned as our chief investigator. This is the first time that term and position came into play. And he told Rajab to go to all of the places in the 5 boroughs where the Gods and Earth was and find out who was responsible for the teachings in that area. And Rajab went to all those areas, and it was 16 of them. And he came back and reported knowledge equality too, and he reported it to the father. And I had Pelon, and he came up there, because Rajab, when he came, he told us to have everybody there. And I had about 32 young guards on Earth there. I don't think it was on Earth. 32 guards there. And in Pelon, you had Latin and Caucasian. And I had some young Latin brothers and some young Caucasians there. And that was real highlighted because at that time, we didn't have no real populace of Latin brothers amongst us. Very, very few, if any. Kindu from Medina. No Caucasians at that time you could mention until Bakim from Pelon, the one that I was teaching, was there. And Rajab spotted them, and he brought back the information to the father. And then the father called a parliament. It wasn't a parliament. We was in the school. But he wanted every other 16. He wanted the 16 individuals that Rajab said was responsible, or leaders of those 16 areas. They come to the school and we had a meeting. And when we had the meeting, the father just told us what that was about. That's when he told us about sending Rajab out to 16, who we were, and he wanted all us to know each other. He wanted all to be in contact with each other. And of the 16, it was one brother from Medina. His name was Katanga, right? And he came, and he was high off of heroin. And I took him out of the school, and the father seen me, and I took him around the corner and was getting ready to whip his ass, you know, because we wasn't dealing with none of that. But he came to this meeting like that. And the father sent somebody around the corner to get me and bring him back. And, you know, we just, like, chunked him off, really. We didn't do nothing. But anyway, he was like a negative in that environment. But he did have the responsibility of some in Medina. And he went wild with it, too. I'm not even going to history of him. And there was another brother from Medina named Bakim. And he was a good brother. And he was responsible. But he later had a mental and disappeared. Of the other 14, everybody else did well.
So let me follow, because I know the Five Perecneters came about in the era from the civil rights to the Black Power era in the 60s, which was a prominent era in the black experience over here in Muslim North America. Now, it's commonly known amongst the Five Perecneters, the stance is we're not pro-black or anti-white. Now, my question is, can you share any significant role that a white person has played or currently playing within the culture, or even took these teachings back and taught their own people?
Yeah, like Bakim early in 66, 67. 67. He took it back to his family, and they was Caucasian and Latino in his family. And Azrael, he took it back to his family, Azrael was taught by the father. He took it back to his family. They was out of New Jersey. I met Azrael's brother, Bobby Kennedy. He was all right, too. And Azrael brought some women back, you know. Then the high government official, like Lindsay was serious about the teaching. He's the one that really put this statement out there when he told people at the Central Park Mall, when he introduced the father on the bandstand and told him this Allah, he's a leader of a young cultural group in Harlem, the Five Perecneters, and he said they for righteousness. He said they for righteousness, right? That was there, and I seen that. But it later came out that Lindsay also had previously said something similar in that February. That was April that he said, April 66. April 7 to be exact. I remember it perfectly because it was the commemoration of Dr. Martin Luther King's assassination, the first major commemorative, posthumous commemorative event. And it was big, 72,000 people, Allah being introduced, and he was being introduced about being righteous. But Lindsay had spoke to a joint Senate appropriation committee hearing in Washington, D.C. in that February. And he had told them, the congressional legislators, that Allah was not anti-white nor pro-black, but he was for righteousness and teaching the knowledge of himself. Okay, and these is words that the Father put in him, and these is words that he went to these white senators and told them exactly who Allah was. And Allah made him an honorary Five Perecenter. So Lindsay was counted. And then if you was at the the street name change, Sid Davidoff. He said he was probably the only Jewish Caucasian 5%er that he knew. So that was another Caucasian. I didn't even know the father had taught him. And he was in the Lindsay administration. And not to mention him teaching Barry Gartner.
So do you know of anybody in this day and time that's like a Caucasian persuasion?
Yeah,
that's
Justice. Active. He'd be in the street academy, be at the parliaments and all of that. And not only Justice, there's a few others as well. Okay. But Justice, I really mentioned Justice because Justice is on it.
Okay, so let me ask you. It's like it seemed like in today's time, like a lot of the gods of earth take a apolitical stance in what's going on, but in Allah's time, he seemed very political, from dealing with the Mayor Lindsay administration, as well as he was also dealing with the interior side for the people from the parole boards and stuff like that, and educating them. So what lesson could you share from that day and time to make it for people to understand that, you know, we are political, we're not apolitical?
Well, in the sense of politics, right? With the politicians, we apolitical, that we ain't for the misrepresentation of the people's interests, right? The politicians today serve their interests and the interests of whoever paying them, okay? And they the bloodsuckers of the poor, right? But in terms of politics, or either political, being political, is that it deals with the people. And in dealing with the people, you got to deal with the people who deal with the people. If you teaching civilization to others, then they being controlled by who is in power. And who's in power? The politicians. So you got to come to them as the father did, with what it was right. Like Barry Gartner always said that the one thing that he loved about Allah is that if you kept your word to him, then he was going to treat you right. And that's what Barry said his whole relationship was, keeping his word. And the father was saying that, you know, we don't call the devil because he a Caucasian, man. We call him because of what he do. He the devil if he do wrong. He weak and wicked in the wrong that he do. So if he doing weak and wicked things, then he wrong. His very character is wrong. His behavior is wrong. And thus is he a weak and wicked man. And he's grafted in the mind, you know, being the devil. All right, but just keeping this word was the key. So in dealing with the politicians, that they got the power and the position to get the people the things that they need. And like the father dealing with the government is that we needed a school. He needed a school to teach the young. So he had to deal with them who could give him a school. And he didn't go begging. He didn't go begging because everything that the politician represent is supposed to be the people's. You know?
So, so do you see like we see what's going on nowadays with Black Lives Matter, police brutality, which has always been police brutality since we've been engaging with these cats.
Since we've been kidnapped.
So, so it's like, do you think as 5%ers, like the issues that affect us, because we in these communities, like we in what they call the so-called hood and stuff like that, do you think that we should be playing a more prominent role or be more vocal against issues that affect us directly? Our community.
You should be involved. Okay, you say more vocal.
Evolved.
Okay, yeah, more vocal. You're talking about get more publicity. You know, like I know the guards and the ushers is vocal in the street and the people that they deal and talk to. because they keep it real. They keep it real more so than anybody else. But being in front of the camera, you know, that is a different thing.
No, I'm not talking about.
Okay, then they are vocal.
I'm be more
and
like,
more involved.
Yeah, more involved, more active. Like our presence should be felt whatever's going on.
It is. You may not be aware of it. I just spoke to Raheem from Rhode Island, and he invited me to Rhode Island to speak at a Black Lives Matter event. And he asked, and he said he got a budget, you know, that he can get us up there and back, hotel and all that. And he asked me to pick a couple of guards to come up there to give our perspective from the Black Lives Matter perspective, right? And I told him that would be dynamite, you know, because, I mean, we Black and our lives definitely matter. There's no question about it, right? I said, but the thing is, you got to check out the platform of the LLC of Black Lives Matter. That's the organization, the corporation, right? And when you go into what they're about, what's that? Them letters they talk about, the LBGT, okay? And I say, yo, we're not coming from that perspective. That's a people's preference, right? It's not preferable that we getting murdered because we have a preference of sex or partners or stuff of that nature. We get murdered because we Black. Okay, we come from that perspective. And when you go and look at what they're about in their platform, they don't have no provisions for the care and protection of the Black male. You know, you could draw it up, pull it up on your thing. And it don't say nothing about the fathers, the brothers, the uncles, the sons, the nephews, and things of that nature. It speaks about the LBGQ, whatever, and the Black women and the Black children. And it totally omit the information about the Black man being included in there. And the brother responded like, yeah, well, I'm the chairman, president of that chapter, and we already had great discussions about it, and we coming with the Black man included. That's why I'm the president. That's what he said. Raheem. That's why he's the president. Gary Desner is the president of the Black Lives Matter in Rhode Island. Okay. And he's including on that agenda, right, the Black male to be included in that platform of what we're about with the Black Lives Matter LLC, right, that was incorporated by the three sisters. And I met one of them. I can't even remember which.
That's peace, God. I got an interesting question.
Yeah.
The flag. I didn't wear my flag today, or my flags today. So, what's like, you know, how most people get their flag today is some type of process. It's some type of process. People make you go through the 120, whatever. However people who got hold of the flag. What was the difference, the main difference in how a law issued out universal flags, how a law issued out universal flag and versus the universal flag is given out today?
Well, I tell you, today is given out according to the way someone or some group decided that this is how we're going to give out the flag. When I got mine from Allah, before I got my flag, he asked me what I wanted, what name did I want on the flag. That's all he asked me.
That was it.
That was it. Then when the flags came in a little cardboard box, He just took it out and gave it to me, and I put it on. That was the extent of him, the father, giving me the flag. Now what came later, I don't know who started it, but that's what it evolved into.
Okay.
Somebody taking you through this, that, or the other about the flag. But Allah didn't start that. I got one of the first flags issued. The first time we got flags, I got one from the father.
Okay.
And all he asked me was my name.
That's it.
That was it.
And another thing that I'm real curious about, in our culture, right? Like the references, like from the 5% Nation of Islam, Allah's World Manifested, the Nation of Gods of Earth, or Allah's 5%. Like, could you share like anything on it? Because like right now, especially during the social media time, it seemed like it's like whoever say they Allah's 5%. If you say you Nation of Gods of Earth, and you like you fake or you phony, like can you like shed any light to that situation?
Well, the light that I can shed to that is what I know from my experience of the knowledge itself. And when we first started manifesting ourselves, we were saying we was the sons of Allah. And then sometime in October of 64, to be exact, October 10th, when the father announced to Al-Jabba as Prince Allah and Kareem, Black Messiah, I think it was on the stoop at 230 West 126th Street. I think it was 230. And it was Mr. Dickens' building, and the father used to be the superintendent. He gave it to the father, actually. And he announced that from this day on, we would be the 5%ers. Allah's 5%ers. And that's when we started saying we was 5%ers. October 10th, 1964. And it wasn't no problem. We was also saying that we was the Nation of Islam, the 5% Nation of Islam. That's when we started saying we was the 5% Nation of Islam, to make the distinction from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, Nation of Islam. We became the 5% Nation of Islam. And from about that time till the father went home, we was the 5% Nation of Islam. But before he went home, in the later part of 66, the early part of 67, when he started telling us he was going home, what we was going to do when he go home, we started realizing that we had to be the guards that he had taught us to be. And I might have jumped that in 66, he had actually started telling us that we was God. In fact, he told me and God Supreme August 1st, 1966, that we was God. But he told us don't tell nobody until he came home. So we didn't say it until he came home. Then when he came home in 67, he gave us that. And then we started saying we was God. Then we changed our name in 68 and started having God names. What I mean by that is that we no longer carry the names as Muslims from the 99 attributes. Qasim name was Qasim from the attribute. My name was Hakeem from the attribute. But we dropped that, and he told us to maintain and pick up righteous names, mathematical names, universal names. And that's when we started using mathematical name. I became Born Allah, and Qasim became God Supreme. And Young God, he became Young God. Knowledge Allah, Dahu became Knowledge Allah. Messiah Kareem became the Black Messiah. And Naheem became Bismillah, and so forth and so forth. But when the father started telling us that he was going home, in the later months that he was with us, in 69, he started telling us that we wasn't going to no longer be known as the 5%, that we was going to be the nation of gods and earth. And at that time, it really didn't sink in. We knew that he was talking about he was leaving us. How he was going to go, I didn't know. Nobody else really said, but he also said during that time that whoever was coming, he used to tell us exactly where they had to hit him. And he got shot 7 times, and he told us why they had to hit him in them 7 spots that they hit him. You know? But again, at the time that he said it, it was like above my head. And it wasn't real. It didn't seem real. But one thing that did seem real, that he said that when he did go, that we was going to be dead for a year. And that came to pass. And when that came to pass and we realized that we was dead for a year, and we woke up and realized that we was no longer the 5%, some Muslim brothers had used the name 5% to give a dance. And we wanted to know who these people saying they 5%. We the 5%. And it dawned on us that the Father said that we weren't going to no longer be the 5%. That we was going to be the nation of gods and earth. But we still had that name. So we hunt these dudes out. Me, God Supreme, and Knowledge of Law. And we was designated as the representatives of the 5% nation through the New York Urban League. That anything that they had to do with the nation, they would come to me, God Supreme, and Knowledge of Law. Right? And we hunt these dudes out. They came to the school and told them if they didn't come to school, if we catch them, we was going to do some serious work. Because they not the 5%, we the 5%. But when they came to say, yeah, okay, y'all alive, but we thought y'all was dead. That's what the dude said. And God Supreme, he was the youngest one. He took real offense to that and wanted to do something to the dude then. And all this was right. You know what I mean by right? Yeah, okay. So, but no, we're not going to do nothing to them, and we're not going to do nothing to them in here. And we gave them clear passes that if they come, we're going to set this thing straight. And they agreed to set it straight, but they sold some tickets, and they got to get a thing. But we can come and announce to the people that was there who the real 5% was, and that they wasn't the 5%. And we went, and Knowledge spoke. He was, at that time, like, to us, he was the closest one that imitated the Father's character. I'm talking about the demeanor, the speech, the way, the action, everything. So he was perfect. And I even ran Knowledge of Law as the youth mayor of Harlem for how you act. But let me wrap that up real quick. So we came through that, and when we came through that, that's when we said we had to show and prove that Allah was alive through us. And then we realized that he said that we was going to be the nation of gods and earth. So we couldn't say in all practicality that Allah and his 5% because we couldn't point to Allah no more. Except we pointed to ourselves. And who was we? We was the gods that Allah born through the 5%. And we went from the 16th degree to the 39th degree. Tell us what you hope to live to see the day when the gods, and that was our stamp, the gods, and we asserted ourselves, and from there, and we said the 5% nation of gods and earths. And we pushed that, me, God supreme, and knowledge of law. And it didn't take too well when we really asserted with a lot of the firstborn from Medina. Because they didn't get it the last couple of days that the Father was with us. Of the 12 that was with the Father that night, none of them was from Medina. The night the Father went home. So in the last week that he was giving us that, I don't know how many brothers from Medina got it. And when we was giving it to them, some of them was rejecting it. That they know we 5%. Okay, you 5%. Ain't nobody disputing that. And we didn't come hard. Well, you can't say, you Allah in the 5%, because where's Allah? If it's not you. And he said we was the gods. So that's how we left it, and we settled it on that. The 5% nation, the gods and earth. And other brothers will say Allah and his 5%. Yeah. When we went through the park in 68, and we went through 72,000 people, and the Father was leading us, and they were saying, who that man? And we were saying, Allah and his 5%. Who that man? Allah and his 5%. We came all the way from the back. First we let him into the park, and the Father told us to get on the side and let them go through. Let the dignitaries, the government officials, lead them into the park. But not through Harlem. We let them through Harlem. But lead them into the park. So he let them in the park. Then when they all got in, and we came in to the bandstand, we wiggled our way through up to the front, and everybody was asking, who that man? Allah and his 5%. So we could identify, point, that man is Allah, and we his 5%. After June 13th, 1969, who on this planet Earth could point, that man is Allah, and them is his 5%. So it wasn't practical. So we had to elevate and make it practical. We put the truth into practice. So the practice was, now those 5%ers, Allah's 5%ers, who is the 5% nation of God and earth. So when we say Allah, we point to ourselves today. And them brothers are still saying Allah and his 5%, who they pointing to?
That's deep. That's deep. I'm Nation of Gods and Earth. That's how I got it. But I want to ask a question about Abu Sahid, because it seemed like I had the opportunity when I was behind the wall to read his book, The Naked Truth. But he wrote a degree before that, and somebody shared the degree, straighten it out. I think it was Let's Straighten It Out. And because I didn't know, I might have been almost.
It was a newspaper article.
Yeah, I think I was almost 30 when I came across that degree. And so, because up until that time, most people thought justice came out the temple with a law. So when Abu Sahid came, it seemed like people was like, oh, he claimed jumping, he was fronting. But I saw a picture with you and Abu Sahid. I think
a nice picture.
Yeah. So what's the take on that? Like, could you clear?
I don't know what you mean. What's the take on that?
Did he come? Was he with a law and the temple came out?
Shahid?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And was he walked with the law? Was us?
Yeah. He was. Shahid said he was his road dog.
Okay.
That's a negative term, right? But Shahid was in the mosque with the Father. He was in advanced fruit. They was in the minister class. And Shahid was actually the first one in the mosque to bear witness to the Father being Allah. And he wrote it in his book, and it occurred. Now, this is, I don't know, sometimes he would say that it happened in Jamaica Center in Queens. And the Father was telling the Muslim brother, they were selling papers out the mosque. The Father was Clarence 13X. Shahid was 37X. John 37X. And they were selling the papers. And the Father was dropping it on the Muslim brother, telling him he was Allah. And Shahid said he just listened. And he didn't see nothing wrong with what the Father was saying. And the Muslim, went on about his business like, yeah, well, Brother Clarence, you Brother Clarence. And the Father said, no, I'm Allah. And Shaheed say, well, that's who I bear witness to, and that's who I'm with. And from that day on, he was with the father. But they were still in the mosque. So when the father left, the father was put out by himself. Shaheed left, and Shaheed said that he took the book. Shaheed was a secretary too, so he had access to the books. And he took a book. They both was in the minister class, student minister class. But Shaheed came out the mosque, and he gave the father the book. And the father took the book and used everything except the problem book. And he told him he didn't need no problem because we was the solution to all the problems concerning the so-called American Negro. And Shaheed dealt with the problem book. He was proficient with problems. And that was a problem because he later became the problem. When you speak about Heron, he the one that, as the father was teaching Messiah, Bismillah, and Yahara, the firstborn, Shaheed had him up in Pelon messing with Heron. And I got that from Messiah, Bismillah, and Yahara. You know, so the father kind of banished him. But he never told me about Shaheed in that instance, about Heron. He told me about Shaheed, want to be a stick-up man, want to carry guns, and things of that nature. He warned him against the gun, and he eventually got busted for having a gun, went to jail and shit like that. He didn't tell me about Shaheed. The father never told me about Shaheed being strung out like, what Shaheed described it? A lab rat monkey.
Yeah. A monk.
Yeah. Shaheed said that.
He definitely said that. You know, he went through his 30-year journey on Hebron. He definitely said that.
Yeah.
So let me because this is another when people be saying like in this day and time, right? Like, you know, I watch a lot of different interviews with different brothers, and let's say some of these blood brothers, they say they used to be gods, but they say they was renegade gods, or what the concept of a renegade god.
I don't know nothing about that.
Okay,
that's before my time. After my time, I don't know.
Oh, you don't know the now?
A renegade guy? I ain't never even heard nothing like that. I heard a renegade Muslim. They used to call us renegade Muslims.
Yeah, so they was saying that, you know, like a lot of them claim they was renegade gods, and because you know a lot of them turned into Bloods, and a lot of you was home.
I don't know nothing about that.
I understand. Yeah. So I was unfortunately I wasn't home. So and a lot of their foundational stuff is actually our stuff.
Yeah, I know that.
So when the brothers that was gods that was in the can, when the administration started putting the clamps on, this is how we got mislabeled.
Right.
This is why all
That's
the
right.
brothers
the
start.
gang thing.
Yeah, this is why all the brothers start fighting the cases. But if you don't know nothing about no renegade god, I don't know nothing about no renegade god. We can push that.
Yeah.
We can push that forward. So let's talk about the Earth for a second, because I would be getting phone calls if I didn't talk about the Earth. So, and a lot of time, like, what was like the Earth's part especially in the beginning? Like, what was the Earth's part in the development of the culture?
Well, I tell you, man, the early Earths was some serious young sisters. It wasn't many, but the ones that were, they were serious in the culture. I mean, to tell the truth, they would teach the Earths like we taught the brothers. They taught the sisters like we taught the brothers.
Pause right there one quick.
Yeah.
Definitely pause, because so the Earths taught other sisters.
Yeah.
Okay. I've actually seen some when I was like, that's not right. That it was some God saying that Earth can't teach Earth. I mean, Earth can't teach. Like you know.
Well, whoever said that, that's on them. But
okay.
I'm talking about what I've seen and how like O'Malley, Queen O'Malley.
That passed away.
She was taught, she was taught by Prince. She was she was the second sister. Sister Carmen, she was the first. She was taught by Saeed, right?
Yeah.
And she taught women and brought them to us. And then we would enlighten them farther. But the earth used to bring the women to us. They had to teach them something.
Mm-hmm.
They had to let them know something about who the Father was, and they brought them to us. Shavasia brought us Sister Mecca. You know, Uhura taught Makiba. That was one of the few in the early days. And then who brought Ebony? I think Shavasia brought Ebony. I'm not sure, but I think, you know, and it was the Earth in Kenya, Kiata, Bismillah, you know, Alasia. Like my Earth, Namina brought Alasia and Salima, and then they hooked up with a god. But they was first introduced to it from the Earth. They're friends.
Okay, so that's the early Earth. Now
That's early. That's in the
now it's
65, 66, 67.
I think in one of these parliaments, I think last year was an older Earth. I can't think of her name right now. She got up and called herself a goddess, and it was a lot of
Yeah, because
controversy.
that must have been Cypher, because the father taught him that, but he said that them sisters that was with us, they wasn't the goddess, and they couldn't be the goddess because their fathers was taught by who? The devil. So they essentially had the teachings from their daddies who was taught by the devil. And that they had to be taught by their fathers who had to be God, like we were. Our daughters would be goddesses because they would be our essence. They're the essence of their God, who is their fathers, manifesting themselves as what? Gods. You can't be taught by a devil and then manifest yourself as a god. I mean, they was 85%, they promised was 85%, and in all likelihood died as 85%, right? Taught from the teachings from the plantation. They didn't come and get the knowledge. They didn't even embrace what Elijah was giving up, you know, to become good Muslims or whatever the case may be. You know, but he told us, and God Supreme is on the set, and he could tell you the same thing I'm telling you, that our daughters were goddesses. And when you did the research, a lot of brothers see they don't know. They allege that that's a concept from the Greeks. Where the Greeks get the knowledge from? They stole it from us. The stolen legacy is from original people, right? But at any rate, if you read any of the books before the Greeks, the coming by day, all it speaks about is the gods and the goddesses. And these are books by original, no Greek book. And it speaks about the gods and the goddesses. And they were pairs, you know? So all that when you hear brothers say, oh, ain't no goddesses and all that, and oh, that's a Greek concept. Yeah, well, they don't know what they're talking about.
So the goddess's father has to be God.
Definitely.
Oh, got you. So the other women that's Earth, that's like saying that they goddesses.
Them older sisters, if they bear witness to their husband and embrace him as their father of civilization, then they might could make that transition. But they got to embrace him as their father of civilization, not like their daddy, because they didn't get it from their daddy. Their daddy didn't have it. They give it to them. You know?
Let me ask you this, because we in America, and America is extremely a patriotic society.
Yeah.
Sexist and misogynistic.
Yeah.
And we came up in a society. We like America is like the soup stock. We like carrots inside that soup stock.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think that we do we advocate and do a good job in fighting those traits within inside of our own culture?
I don't know what you mean by traits.
Like patriarchal, sexism, misogynation.
That's the ism that keep people divided.
Okay.
The patriarch, the matriarch. The very name Allah, when you break it down, it manifests the man and the woman and the child in it. So it's like our flag, the sun, moon, and stars. That's the universe, right?
Definitely.
Okay, the name Allah is a universal name. Now, how do you see in the name Allah the man, the woman, and the child? I'll show you. When you break the name down in syllables, the first syllable is AL. AL in Arabic is the definite article of the man, okay? And it's in the masculine, a masculine pronoun. The man, that's a him, a he, and what other pronoun for man? Him, he, and his, right? When you go to the next two letters, you're breaking it down, Allah, in syllabus, is L-A, La. Well, in Arabic, which is the language of paradise, the first language spoken, a lot of people don't realize it, but it's the language of mathematics too. It's the language that says that, given the mathematics, and we deal with supreme mathematics. So you got the La, and La is the in the feminine in Arabic, meaning the pronoun, the her, the he, and the she. All in the name of Allah. Then you get to the last letter. What's the last letter? H. And what's H in our supreme mathematics? Our supreme alphabets.
He or her.
He or her. And when you look at it, the very structure of it, he or her, when they come together and mate, what they gonna do? Make a baby. Right? Ain't that the process? Yes, I know. So that's our start. And mind you, that's the 8th letter. So correspondingly speaking, the 8th letter in our alphabets and corresponding of shape, the symbol of infinity, is an 8 horizontal. The same way if you got it vertical, the horizontal is symbolic to the infinite.
True indeed.
Okay, so in that name, Allah, you got the man, woman, and child. Okay, so if you want to break it down to the European Western way, you got the patriarch, the matriarch, and the offsprings.
Let me ask you this.
And there ain't no separation.
So we actively fight against that. Now I want to put some spotlight on you yourself. You had when I first met you a few years back, you had initiated a project. You brought people together on the computer lab, and the brother that passed away. Could you shed some little bit of light on the brother that brought all the computers to the computer lab?
Recently?
Yes.
That was Jamel Freedom?
Yes.
Yeah. What kind of light you want me to share?
Just share a little bit about, because the brother,
Jamel
I know
Freedom,
the brother, but
he was an extraordinary individual. This brother was serious, dedicated to our righteous way of life. There wasn't no question about it. And if you want to see somebody that's resilient and never give up on themselves after being shot and paralyzed from the head down, the only thing that he could move was his mouth. He couldn't even move his neck. He could move it slightly, but the only thing, and he operated a specially designed wheelchair with his mouth, a poker stick with his mouth for the phone and computer. And he was real proficient in computer technology. And all he cared about was the nation and the righteousness of the nation and teaching the babies, doing for the babies. And he was highly extraordinary in that he did more in a wheelchair that I've seen 100 so-called brothers come around that school and did nothing for the babies other than hang out and not make a contribution, a significant contribution. You know, so, and he was a poster person, for wheelchair charities. And he still helped the director of the Henry J. Carter special facility and nursing home with all the extracurricular activity that they had. And they used to rent Madison Square Garden and give up charity games for not only the wheelchair people, but the general populace. And we used to go to NBA games on them. And he used to be instrumental in that, you know, and he made it his business to get us the latest hardware and software and computers. I used to go pick them up when they was in the old building on Roosevelt Island. Then when they got a brand new building and got brand new stuff, we would get whatever they was using. When they got rid of the ones on Roosevelt Island, I go pick them up, bring them to the school. When they got to the new building and got new computers, I go get the old ones in the new building and bring them to the school. And in 2018, that was the last time they donated the last set of computers.
True indeed. So let's start wrapping this up a little bit. What initiatives do you have coming down the pipeline that people can watch out that you're doing?
Okay, well, I got a few. The one that I really haven't fully developed, but I have a program of it, and it's called the U of ALLAH. And the gist of it is to universally enlighten all the human families of the planet Earth of our union undeniably being one. And it's basic and it's simple. And I put it in Stroud in this way because the average person don't know themselves or either the you of Allah. When they hear the word Allah, they automatically think of its association with Islam or the religion of Islam or Muslim, those connotations from the East, Orthodoxy, or whatever the case may be. But they never looked at the you of their arm, leg, arm, and head that is on everybody that ever walked the planet Earth. Okay, so when you talk about a family, from our very body structure, we the family of Allah. And the people could deny it, but when they go to the mirror and look at you and see that arm, that leg, that arm, and that head, and then make it out as it is, whether you go from the right or the left, and look at the acronym of it, and take note that you can't call the Creator name in vain, because the Creator named you in His image. And the average person ain't gonna really see it or accept it, because they generally deaf, dumb, and blind, and believe all the bullshit that they've been taught. But when you go to the you of you, it's undeniable and can't be disputed. That you get an A from the arm, a L from the leg, another L from the leg, another A from the other arm, and the head. We call the head the supreme head. Okay, so the you is the you of Allah, and they got to come to that reality.
When can people be expecting this program to be operating?
I was saying 3 months, 90 days.
90 days. That's peaceful. You just coming off a project too. I want to give you credit for the Show and Prove, the Virtue Show and Prove, the educational aspect of the Show and Prove. That was real peace. It was good. If you haven't saw it, go to Show and Prove 2020.com and check that out. And I'd like to thank you for sharing your wisdom and your understanding with us here on Mallah's Insight. For all of y'all that like Mallah's Insight, please go support my books. And if you out there marching, talking about Black Lives Matter and protesting, this is the first urban political street thriller. It got some great gems in it. It speaks on gentrification, police brutality, but the spin on how they address the situation is totally different. And you should go pick it up, so when y'all traveling on those planes, buses, trains, and cars, you got something good to read. Peace. And I'd like to thank the brother for coming out and sharing.
Thank you for setting up the platform.
Peace.